Have the Baltimore Ravens turned a corner? We talk about that, their Week 8 win over the Buccaneers, the trade deadline, and more coming up next here on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And we returned here with another episode of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Ostreicher of Ravens Wire. We're here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And thank you so much for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day. We're free and available on all podcasting platforms, including in video form on YouTube. And if you're here with us in video form on YouTube, be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel if you're here with us in audio form. So whether that's Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, etc. Be sure to hit that follow button. It helps out a ton. We put out Daily Ravens content 5 days per week, so I highly recommend it. That's my personal opinion, and thank you for all the support for everybody who has supported this show. We have a jam-packed episode here today. It is, do we call it Victory Monday, even though the Ravens didn't play yesterday? You know, I'm going to say it's still Victory Monday because the Ravens did win on Thursday night over Tampa Bay in Week 8, 27-22. And the first time we'll talk about that game a little more, just do more of a quick recap of the game, talking about the offense, the defense, etc. Just wrapping up final thoughts from that game on my end. In the second segment, though, I do really want to talk about if the Ravens have begun or have already turned a corner here. There was a big stretch, a big emphasis on the stretch that the Ravens have coming up in their schedule, and how they needed to build some momentum going into that stretch. And with 2 straight wins here against both Cleveland and Tampa Bay, it seems like they might have done it. So we'll get into that in the second segment. And finally, we'll dive into a bit of trade deadline talk. Obviously, that is tomorrow on November 1st. Today is Halloween, so happy Halloween to everyone. I don't have a costume on. I guess I'm just me today. So we'll dive into the trade deadline a bit in the final segment. So let's talk about the Tampa Bay game again. 27-22 Ravens win. Didn't start off great. Really felt like it was another one of those games where the Ravens would really have to get it together, or else it would have been probably somewhat of a blowout. But Tampa Bay was injured. They have been ravaged by injuries this season. But you know what? Every team does go through injuries. But I do want to mention, the secondary for Tampa Bay, missing a ton of key starters, the offensive line, wide receivers. So Tampa was going through it a little bit. But hey, Baltimore has their fair share of stuff too. The first quarter, Baltimore had 21 total yards of offense, including -5 rushing yards. So not what you want to see out of an offensive unit that has Lamar Jackson, but to their credit, they ended up really getting the job done in the second half in particular. I think so. What happened was offense and defense in the first quarter was pretty bad. The Bucs drove down the field on the Ravens on their first possession. They got 10 quick points, and the offense couldn't do anything in response. So it got a lot of people up in arms and saying, what is going on? Why can't this team do this? Why can't? So the defense started to respond in the second quarter, where we started to see them string together big play after big play, getting the ball back to their offense. But the offense was still sputtering in the second quarter. And Baltimore ended up going into the half down 10-3. There were actually no points scored in the second quarter by either team. The end of the first quarter, it was 10-3. But obviously, the halftime adjustments were big. Multiple players talked about, one, the game plan that Baltimore had in the first half versus the second half, and coaches too. And two, that they didn't panic in that halftime locker room. They understood that the game was still in reach. And John Harbaugh, Lamar Jackson, etc., talked about the fact that the game plan early on was to spread Tampa Bay out and just see if they could get something going in the pass game. Baltimore only had 2 rushes at the end of the first quarter. They were really, really, really trying to see what they could do through the air. Obviously wasn't working as well as they wanted to. So they go straight to the ground in the second half. And they finished this game with 33 attempts, 231 yards, and 1 touchdown on the ground. That's 7 yards per carry. You have Gus Edwards, 5.9, Kenyon Drake, 8.9, Lamar Jackson, 4.8, Devin Duvernay, 16.5 with that score, and then Justice Hill, 7. So it was incredible. Baltimore ended up in this game running it 33 times, but they still passed more. They had 38 pass attempts. Lamar Jackson, obviously all 38 of those. The second half, big credit to, you could shout out a lot of people. Credit to the defense, credit to Justin Houston on the defensive side of the ball, guys stepping up, Roderick Washington, a couple others as well, obviously. On offense, though, credit to Lamar Jackson, credit to Isaiah Likely, credit to Devin Duvernay, credit to Demarcus Robinson, credit to Gus Edwards, and also credit to Greg Roman for what he was able to do in the second half. The first half was not great Greg Roman ball, I'll tell you that. But in the second half, we saw creativity, we saw smash mouth football, and I think we saw how the Ravens offense is supposed to look. Now, there are different variations of that offense. Sometimes they'll throw even more, sometimes they'll run even more. But we saw the time of possession dominating Ravens where Baltimore held the ball for almost 20 minutes more than Tampa Bay did. Baltimore held it for 38 minutes and 23 seconds. Tampa held it for 21 minutes and 37 seconds. Baltimore went 6 of 13 on third down. So just under 50% for the game. Baltimore, though, had 453 total yards. They averaged 6.1 yards per play. Penalty-wise, you still want to see them clean up some stuff, 7 for 101. But again, it was the momentum building that they did in the second half that I think was so key and so huge for them. And I do want to talk a bit about those offensive playmakers who stepped up, because in this game, Baltimore saw Mark Andrews leave with a shoulder injury. Rashad Bateman re-aggravated his foot injury. Both those guys were not available for the second half. So you had to have guys step up like Likely and like Robinson and like Duvernay. And those guys, they stepped up to the plate and they delivered in such a big way. I mean, I'm so impressed. And something I talked about with Bruce Cunningham at 105.7 on Saturday, with Isaiah Likely in particular, I know I've kind of mentioned this here and there, is the fact that in the preseason, it wasn't Lamar Jackson throwing to Isaiah Likely. It was Tyler Huntley. It was Anthony Brown. We hadn't yet seen the Lamar Jackson to Isaiah Likely connection really not pay off, but we just hadn't seen both of them have many opportunities with each other. That trust, I guess, wasn't as established. Not that they didn't trust each other to begin with, but we all know the connection that Lamar Jackson has with Mark Andrews. It is obvious. It is there. It is wonderful what they have. But you have Andrews go down, you have Bateman go down, and what has to happen? Lamar Jackson is forced. He's forced pretty much to throw the ball to other people to get others involved. And I think in the long haul, this is going to have a really positive impact on them because of the fact that, let's say a team game plans to take away Mark Andrews and Rashad Bateman, and they successfully take away both. Now, that's a very hard thing to do. Usually one of those guys is going to have a big game if the other is just schemed out by an opposing defense. But let's say it happens, right? Now you have Lamar Jackson who trusts Isaiah Likely in those situations because you can't double everyone. You can't scheme everybody out. Someone's going to be open here or there. And Lamar Jackson, it's his job to find those guys, deliver the ball. And it's the other guy's job to get open and make life easier. There was one play for Isaiah Likely where Jackson was under pressure. And Isaiah Likely, like a veteran, worked back to Lamar Jackson. He found the soft spot in the defense and helped him out. And it was a completion, and it went for positive yards. That's exactly what you want out of pass catchers because you want to have them in situations to help out the quarterback. I mean, obviously, right? But Isaiah Likely did that. He showed off yards after the catch ability. He showed off his hands, showed off the ability to make tough contested catches, showed off the ability to toe tap in the back of the end zone for his first career touchdown. Demarcus Robinson making key plays, Devin Duvernay making an impact. But the by and large of it is Baltimore's offense, I think, did a really, really good job in the second half of this game. And it's what people wanted to see for so long. Those 10-play drives, those 8-minute drives. Those are the types of plays. Those are the types of drives that fans wanted to see, that people wanted to see. And it's not like they had a ton of them. It was more like they had a 7-minute drive here and another 7-minute drive here. And it wasn't like they had some of these 12, 13 play or 12, 13-minute drives. But they were still, I think it was a positive step in the right direction, especially coming off of a win in week 7, going into Tampa Bay on a short week on Thursday Night Football. You're missing some guys. You go down some guys during the game, and you're still able to come out with that 27-22. And was it perfect? No, it wasn't perfect. Obviously, you want to see stuff cleaned up in certain aspects, and we'll talk about that in the second segment. But by and large, everything considered, especially considering what that first quarter was, which was just terrible football by Baltimore in many different aspects, I think there was the response, the bounce back was great. And I think it could be the spark to a potential strong second half of their year. So we'll talk about that in the second segment. Coming up, we'll be diving into if the Ravens have turned a corner here as we dive into almost the second part of their year. Their bye is coming up soon, but they have another primetime game in week 9 against the Saints on Monday Night Football. So be sure to stay tuned. Still a ton to talk about here on the show. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp Therapy Online. And sometimes I wish that life came with a user manual, but BetterHelp Online Therapy is basically the next best thing. Unfortunately, life doesn't come with that user manual. So when it's not working for you, it is normal to feel stuck. But therapists are trained to help you figure out the cause of challenging emotions and learn productive coping skills, which makes therapy the closest thing to a guided tour of the complex engine called you. BetterHelp has connected over 3 million people with licensed therapists. It's convenient, secure, and accessible anywhere. It's 100% online. And there are tons of benefits to therapy, such as learning coping skills, self-empowerment, dealing with trauma, and more. And everyone deserves to feel their best. BetterHelp makes it easy to get started as the world's largest therapy service. They've matched millions of people with professionally licensed and vetted therapists available 100% online. You have all the benefits of in-person therapy, plus it's more convenient, more accessible, and more affordable. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to match with a therapist. If things aren't clicking, you can easily switch to a new therapist anytime. It couldn't be simpler. There are no waiting rooms, there's no traffic, and no endless searching for the right therapist. So get unstuck with BetterHelp. Learn more and save 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/lockedon. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. We're back here, our second segment of Locked On Ravens here on Victory Monday. Kevin Oestreicher, your host, still here with you. Thank you so much again for tuning in with me, making Locked On Ravens your first listen of the day here. Be sure to make your second listen Locked On Sports Today. From the games that matter, the most of the biggest stories in sports go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with local experts and insights only Locked On can provide. Locked On Sports Today available on this app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcast. But let's talk about the burning question of the day here. Do the Ravens now have the momentum to say that they've turned a corner? And I think the answer, it is more complex than just yes or no, but I'm going to say yes and no. I'm going to say they have positioned themselves to fully turn the corner. They're halfway there, but they have shown so many positive signs over these past 2 weeks. Again, has not been perfect. And that's why I say the answer is not 100% yes, because there are still some things you want to clean up on. You want to have this team first and foremost play consistent football, which means 60. I want to see that game, that one game. Maybe it's Monday night against the Saints. Maybe it's a game down the line here in a couple weeks. I want to see them dominate a team for 60 minutes, front to end, just absolutely wallop a team. That, I think, would say, yeah, the Ravens have turned the corner. Because, look, we've seen them come out with really close wins. We've seen them come out with heartbreaking losses. We've seen them handle adversity well. We've seen them handle it not very well. So it's been kind of a back and forth, a give and take of, oh, they've turned it. Oh, it's back to what it was. Oh, they've turned it. Oh, it's back again to what it was. So you want to see a dominant performance in terms of, look, the second half, if we had seen that in both halves, dominant offense, dominant defense, dominant special teams. Week 6 against the Chargers last year. The Chargers come in super hot. Justin Herbert in the MVP conversation. The Ravens shut them down. They are great offensively. They are great defensively. That is a type of performance that I want to see. Now, I'm not saying that they can't turn a corner completely without doing that, but I do think they have put themselves in a position where the momentum right now, it is clear that they have it. But what are they going to do with it, right? Because you have the 2 straight wins. They finally have a winning streak. They had not had one all season. It's been win-loss, 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 win-loss. They finally get the 2 straight wins. And the key part of this, or at least one of the key parts, there are a couple, is the fact that Baltimore's schedule on paper, again, it's any given Sunday, but on paper, their schedule looks pretty easy, all things considered. I will read it out here. Obviously, Baltimore, as I've talked about, has that Week 9 Monday Night Football matchup against the Saints in Week 9. Their bye is Week 10, so it does give them a nice little break. They have the mini bye, obviously, coming out of Thursday night all the way to Monday night. But then after Monday night, they have another bye till Week 11, where they play Carolina. That'll be a game that, they probably should win. Then you have Jacksonville at Jacksonville Week 12. Again, another game you probably should win if you're Baltimore. Denver in Week 13. I think they're a better team than their record indicates and what they've done this year, but Russell Wilson has not looked very good. So that's a game that if Russell Wilson keeps playing the way that he is playing, you probably should win. Pittsburgh in Week 14 at Pittsburgh. Who knows who'll be starting in that game? If it's Kenny Pickett, I would hope the Ravens win. If it's Mr. Trubisky, I would hope the Ravens win. This is a game you should win. Then in Week 15, you have to play Cleveland at Cleveland. That's going to be a tough one. Right now I have that one as a loss, but And anything can happen. Cleveland's defense has not been good all year, but really it depends how Deshaun Watson plays and what Deshaun Watson looks like in that situation. Week 16, you go home and play the Atlanta Falcons. That's a game that Falcons are leading the NFC South right now, but I feel like Baltimore does have a talent advantage. Week 17, you play Pittsburgh at home. I think that's a game you should win. Then week 18 against Cincinnati at Cincinnati, that's a game I also have as a loss right now, but Baltimore beat them once. There are ways they can beat them again. So I do have 2 losses remaining on the Ravens schedule right now. I think it is realistic to see them finish with 5 losses this year. Maybe there's a game, and look, there's always the inevitable game where the Ravens are supposed to win it, and we've seen it this year, where the Ravens are supposed to win it, and they drop it inexplicably. There's the game where the Ravens are supposed to lose, and they play up to their opponent, and they beat them. So it could go both ways. There are ways I could see them losing games, but at the same time, I think this stretch heading into the bye, if you can carry momentum and get a third straight win going into the bye where you're able to rest, and maybe after that, or maybe even this week, like maybe in week 9 here, you get a Tyus Bowser back. Maybe you get someone like David Ojabo. I feel like Bowser's going to come back before Ojabo, so maybe it's potentially Bowser week 9 and then Ojabo week 11. I don't know how that's going to work for them. But you're able to heal your guys up. Like this mini bye is so big for like Mark Andrews and Rashad Bateman and Gus Edwards, guys who got injured in that Buccaneers game. Gus Edwards, I think, has been the savior of that offense. I think that Marcus Peters has been the savior of that defense. And Justin Houston, too. I want to give credit to him. Locked on Ravens legend, by the way. But it is interesting to think about just if the Ravens were to dominate a team for a full 60 minutes, one, it would be amazing. It'd be phenomenal. But I think that would give me the confidence to say, yeah, absolutely, this team has 100% turned the corner. I think they're well on their way. They're absolutely on their way. They have positioned themselves well. That second half against Tampa is how Ravens football is supposed to be played. It just is. That is what people have been getting used to, have been accustomed to, where you don't have to rely on Lamar Jackson to do everything for your offense. Lamar Jackson can do a lot for you. Lamar Jackson is one of the best quarterbacks in this league, but it helps when you have other guys stepping up and being able to play with Lamar Jackson and being a compliment to Lamar Jackson, and the run game clicking the way it has over these past couple weeks. That's why I say Gus Edwards has been the savior. He has looked so good in his actions so far. Hopefully he's good to go for week 9 in New Orleans, but they've done a great job. I think adjustments are key for them. It's the adjustments too, right? Like Mike McDonald's defense has adjusted really well over the past couple weeks here as he's really settled into his role on defense. Baltimore's defense is playing a lot better. I mean, this was a unit. We were talking after week 2, week 3. This was a bottom 5 unit in pass defense, a bottom 5 unit in rush defense. Right now, and obviously this is pending Monday Night Football between the Browns and the Bengals, but Baltimore is up to 15th in rush defense. They are giving up 4.4 yards per carry. They are up to 20th in pass defense. They're up to 6.4 net yards per attempt given up. So obviously you want to see those numbers go up. Maybe it's by the next couple weeks, a top 10 rush defense, a top 15 pass defense, but we are seeing the numbers get better slowly. That is the sign of improvement. That is the sign that they are slowly turning that corner, especially with the adjustments. Baltimore right now has the best rushing offense in the league, averaging 5.7 yards per carry. Their pass offense has kind of dipped a little bit. They're 15th right now, so 6.2 net yards per attempt through the air for them. So again, if they can maintain that rushing pace, maybe get up to a top 10 pass offense. This is a team I still think is well positioned to win the AFC North. They currently have the tiebreaker over Cincinnati. They stand at 5-3 right now. Their schedule does seem a bit soft at the moment. So I think they have positioned themselves to turn that corner, but what are they going to do with the momentum? They have built a little bit now. What are they going to do with it? Can they continue and stack and stack? It's about stacking. The players have said it. It's about stacking wins, stacking performances, and I want to see if they can stack more. I'm excited to see what they can do on Monday night against the New Orleans Saints. But coming up in our final segment, we'll be talking about the trade deadline. We've talked about it before. It is coming up tomorrow, so we'll dive into a bit more of that. So be sure to stay tuned. You won't want to miss that coming up here on Locked On Ravens. First, though, I do want to tell you a bit about BlueNile. And whether you're looking to pop the question, have a milestone to celebrate, or want to let your love sparkle, BlueNile can help you make your celebrations even more memorable. As the original online jeweler, BlueNile offers the largest selection of independently graded diamonds and pieces priced significantly below traditional retailers. BlueNile has helped millions of couples create their perfect engagement ring. Their easy online tools let you choose the diamond shape, size, and clarity, as well as setting style. BlueNile's bench jewelers will then help you handcraft your perfect one-of-a-kind engagement ring. If you're looking for a piece of fine jewelry to commemorate a special milestone, but you're having trouble choosing, BlueNile has jewelry experts on hand 24/7. They're available via phone or even chat to help you find a memorable gift at every budget. So shop stress-free with BlueNile's 100% satisfaction guarantee. All BlueNile orders are insured and shipped for free in discreet packaging. They also offer overnight shipping if you're in a rush. So make your moment sparkle with BlueNile. Go to BlueNile.com and use code LOCKEDON to save $50 on your purchase of $500 or more. That's BLUENILE.com, code LOCKEDON to save $50 on your purchase of $500 or more. BlueNile.com, code LOCKEDON. We're back here. Our final segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher, your host, still talking with you after a wacky slate of Sunday games in the NFL, but the Ravens were not a part of that wacky slate as they played on Thursday night and they won on Thursday night. It's always great to have that kind of, free Sunday with a win under your belt if you're the Ravens. And they now enter week 9 against the New Orleans Saints on Monday Night Football, but there is a key date. Before that, it is November 1st. It is tomorrow, and it is the trade deadline. Now, we've talked a lot on this channel recently about the trade deadline. Players the Ravens could make a move for, players the Ravens could trade. We have those shows up from last week, so if you want to check those out just as a little preview, highly recommend it. I think they're really good shows. We talk with multiple very knowledgeable people about that, but we do have a couple of instances where there are going to be guys moved at the deadline. We've already seen a little bit, but a lot of the talk, at least in Baltimore, has been, are the Ravens going to make a move? Should the Ravens make a move? And I think the answer is yes. We'll dive into this more. We'll do like a full trade deadline preview tomorrow for the deadline. We'll get into predictions and stuff, so that'll be fun. But for now, I think, the Ravens should make a move. I think this is the perfect time where you are hot right now. You have momentum. This is the perfect time to add another piece, especially with a longer week. You have the Saints coming up. Again, you don't have to play on Sunday. You have that extra day, and then you have the bye to kind of get them up to speed and get them into whether it be the offense or the defense or special teams. I don't know. Who knows? But offense or defense, most likely. The key topic has been wide receiver. I think that is still where I would go. I think a guy like Brandon Cooks makes a ton of sense. I know so many people want to see Lamar Jackson with his Stephon Diggs or his DeAndre Hopkins or his A.J. Brown. And I'm with you. I'm with you on that. I would love to see that. But with the way things are trending and with just, senses that feel like are probably true, feels like DJ Moore probably isn't going anywhere. Feels like Jerry Jeudy probably isn't going anywhere. So I think Brandon Cooks is a nice, realistic splash. Spencer Schultz called it a little bloop smash, where the Ravens could go out there and trade a third, right? Maybe trade a third and a fifth, whatever the Texans would want. The contract will have to be something that's navigated, but I think that still he is a very talented receiver. Teams want him, and he would be that piece to really, would he be? I think the key for me in a trade is it a needle mover for me, because a guy like Denzel Mims, a guy like KJ Hamler, I don't know, they're good. Like, I think they'd be fine, but it's another one of those, all right, we're trading a fifth or we're trading a sixth. The Ravens are saying, yeah, we're going to do that. And then hope there's contributions that lie beyond what they've done so far. And there is potential in both of those guys and others too, Kendrick Bourne, Nelson Aguilar, etc. But I think for me, Brandon Cooks is a needle-moving move, and I think it is a realistic needle-moving move for a team that if you line up Brandon Cooks next to Rashad Bateman and you have Devin Duvernay, who's played really well, and you can complement guys in like Demarcus Robinson and James Prochet and Tyler Wallace if you want. You have Mark Andrews, Isaiah Likely as well, the running backs. That is a really, really potent offense. And I think if you were to go out there for the Ravens and get that true number one star in a trade, maybe in the offseason, the Panthers say, hey, you know what, DJ Moore, he is still a youngish receiver, but he doesn't fit our rebuilding timeline. Let's go out and get a first for him. I think the Ravens, should do that, but then maybe that's a thing they do. But if they already have Brandon Cooks, it'd be kind of crazy to think about an offense in Baltimore where you have DJ Moore, Rashad Bateman, Brandon Cooks, and Devin Duvernay alongside. Like, that would be lethal as an offense. But then all the questions become, do the Ravens have enough in their offense to feed all the mouths in that offense? And what's it going to look like run-wise? And can they do everything? I think it'd be really cool to kind of think about. And obviously, it's probably not realistic, especially contract-wise with Lamar. Obviously, whether it is franchise tag or extension, slated to make 35, 40, 45, 50 plus million per year, whether it is, again, the 1-year franchise tag or a long-term extension. You got to wonder what the contract situation will look like and just how much you'd be willing to put into that position. And that's another thing, too. Baltimore has recently, historically, been reluctant to involve those first rounders or second rounders for a player, especially when talking about at the trade deadline. And look, they've made moves in the Lamar Jackson era. They've traded for Marcus Peters, they traded for Yannick Ngakoue, et cetera, Calais Campbell. But it hasn't been that, boom, we're trading a first rounder for this stud player who's under team control and is a top 10, top 5 guy at his position at the time. It's been kind of we're going to trade for a really, really good player. Honestly, that's not fair. I think Calais Campbell probably was top 10 when they traded for him, and honestly might still be because he's that good. But it's still like prime player, like 25, 26, who was having a decent or solid season, but people want to see that big splash. Now, I don't know how realistic that is right now, but I think Brandon Cooks, to me, is that realistic splash. Other positions I could see, maybe outside linebacker, if teams are willing to give up cornerback depth. I know Stephon Gilmore's name has been floated around from Indianapolis. Indianapolis is a train wreck right now. Maybe there's something there. Offensive line, it's really hard to find cornerback and offensive, or at least very solid cornerback and offensive line depth on the trade market right now because everybody wants it. Everybody wants tackle depth. Everybody wants cornerback depth. So teams willingly giving it up and a good player at that is pretty hard to find. So I wouldn't be shocked if Baltimore were to move at either of those positions, but I still believe that wide receiver is probably the most likely, followed by edge. But honestly, the Ravens are getting guys back, or we hope, right? We hope they're getting guys like Tyus Bowser and guys like David Ojabo back. And then when those guys come back, I've said it so many times, Odafe Oweh, Justin Houston, Jason Pierre-Paul, Tyus Bowser, David Ojabo. It's a really, really good unit, assuming everyone stays healthy. That is a key thing. There's obviously going to be a ramp-up period, well, most likely. With Gus Edwards, they said, hey, go handle 16 carries or 7, whatever it was, and go out there and handle a full workload in your first game back. But they needed that from him. So for Bowser and Ojabo, you would think there's some kind of snap count, some kind of workload restriction early on. But by the end of the year, I think that's a really strong group. So I think trade deadline-wise, they should make a move. I think it would spark them. They need a spark somewhere. I think a firing after week 8 does not make sense. Maybe if there's a dismal performance in week 9, then that conversation becomes revisited. I think a change at offensive coordinator has been the most talked about thing for probably 2 seasons with Greg Roman. If we get second half Greg Roman in Tampa Bay for the rest of the season, hey, sign me up for that. But if we go back to the non-adjustment, some play calling issues, not reading games, then that's a conversation that I think will come back up. But for now, hey, Baltimore's on a 2-game win streak. The second half of that game has a lot of people feeling good. I give credit to the offense. I give credit to the defense. But we will see what happens during the trade deadline coming up here tomorrow. And that's all I have here today on Locked on Ravens. But coming up tomorrow, we'll be diving in to the full trade deadline preview for the Baltimore Ravens. Talk about, again, if they should make a move, whether they will or not, who they could target, and more. So be sure to stay tuned for that, and I will see you back here tomorrow.